welcome on there you go. Welcome on YouTube, and welcome to the Destination Freedom Weekly Call. Um, I'm glad that you're on, and this has been a wild afternoon. I've never usually had them not have my room ready before I get to a hotel, but this happened at the Marriott in Villages. So, but that's okay. We're going to get into everything tonight, and hopefully we'll have a good time, answer some of your questions. Let me just make sure you can hear me. That would be really helpful. And
Yes.
okay, good. All right, awesome. Well, we've had a great response, as we said last week. At the beginning of the month, Jeff Berwick had launched the interview on live. I guess it was on Dollar Vigilante and on BitChute and different places like that, and we've certainly got a good response, and so that's been good. And an influx of people with questions and all, and it's really helpful to come into this kind of a venue and ask your questions, because it's very difficult or challenging for me to get with everybody one-on-one. In some of our processes that we do, of course there is some one-on-one, and and we will do that with people as we can, and so that'll be a good thing. I'm just trying to pull my thoughts together. I literally was running at the last minute, just trying to get into our room, get my wife situated, and so she's content. I haven't even pulled things out of the car, so I'm still in my head of arriving. Oh, that's good. Um, That's so. Anyway, so I'm going to answer your questions, and so this hour we're going to get into talking about state citizenship and answering your questions. So it's my goal to do a call every week, because we have so many people that are interested in asking questions and getting them answered. So that's important for us to do each week, and I'm going to be working on a naturalization process for a client here in Florida, and that's one of the reasons that we're down here, is to assist in that. So we're looking forward to those processes, dealing with the courts here in Florida as we naturalize someone into the country of Florida, without the feds. But we'll see how that goes. So this is nothing new that we're doing. This is stuff that's been done before. We're just bringing it forward and letting people know that they have a right to do certain things. And the feds have been doing a certain thing, and that's okay, but we're not doing that. So let me make sure that I can get your questions answered. So I want to make sure that I don't miss anybody. Let's see here. Someone said they watch Jeff's walkie-talkie all the time. Oh, that's great. And we've gotten great feedback about the talk, and I'm thankful for that. Are they going to? Yeah, let's say what's the fact? Investment 401k. Okay. Oh, good. I'm glad you asked that. We'll answer those questions about monies and things that you've had all the time. I'm just going to make one request in the process here, is that all of your questions are to me; they're not to each other, and that I just would ask that people don't share, like answer questions and such, because it really requires me to read what you're reading, and so it's like being in a classroom and people are side talking, and so people aren't listening to what I'm saying; they're reading what you're saying, and it's kind of rude. So I'm just asked that you would govern yourself in a way that this time is really for people to ask me questions, and then I get them answered for you. And again, I'm going to follow along, answer questions as they come in. So Benjamin's on YouTube now. He can't ask me other than in the text here for me to read. if anybody on YouTube, when we're live, wants to come into the call, so that if you wanted to ask me a question instead of texting it, then you can come into go to the DestinationFreedom.org website, and the details for logging into this call are there on the first page. And so, you're welcome to do that. And we'll stay on live on YouTube until we complete this, and then this will be out there for people to consider. Okay. So the question was, what about effect on retirements, IRAs, 401ks, all those things that you've set up as a federal citizen, all of those, and all these things that relate to money and things like that. If you look into the code, certainly the tax code, and all of these entities, Columbia, Washington, D.C. And of course, that's not true. People are in different states and things like that. All these corporations that have all these corporations that have the TINs and all of the different tax numbers, those numbers, they're desiring those numbers, and those numbers are also bring them into the District of Columbia. And so most people, by their passport, by their driver's license, by a number of different forms that they fill out, are claiming to be a U.S. citizen. And the State Department, as well as the IRS, defined U.S. citizenship by the 14th Amendment. So Hannah, can you mute yourself until you have, unless you have a question? I'll be glad to take your question. Okay, thank you. So the idea is that on paper, all these people are residing in the District of Columbia, things like that. And so that's why when dealing with those, the 401k, the IRAs, the investments, all those things, you've filled out W-9s or whatever, and you've given them tax ID numbers so that they can write things off when they do payouts and all those things. All that stuff on paper is in the federal zone. All of it needs to be changed. And these days, my sentiment is, the dollar is not, it may be the world currency, but it's certainly not any type of a stronghold or safe place. So if you have investments in the dollar or anything like that, then you hold on to that at your own risk, because even whatever's in your bank is sitting there waiting for the banks to collapse, or the banks to come up with a holiday, or taking half of it, which they've done in different places around the world. You should expect that your money is not safe in the bank. That's unwise to think that it is. Okay, so if your assets, the fruit of your labor is in anything other than dollar, that's far better. And certainly a lot of people feel about gold and silver that way. So my opinion is the amount of money that should be in the bank is the exact amount of money that's coming out of the bank. Okay, that's the idea. So that's the sentiment, and that's what I recommend. So with respect to those IRAs or things that you're having in the stock market and stuff like that, it's safer to pull them out, put them in something else. Even if you were to take, half loss or whatever, you'll get it into something that's going to be more sound than the dollar. Someone says here, they were born in Michigan with a Michigan birth certificate, have been domiciled in Ohio for a while now, to become an Ohio resident. Or I don't speak to, you want to reside in Ohio, just go there and stay a while. Residing in a place is not the same as having habitation and domicile. So any statute or code that deals with residing is irrelevant. Okay, so that's not really what you're after. If you're going to be a citizen of Ohio, then you would set up habitation domicile. Now, one of the ways that you can citizen of Ohio is if you have a driving code, you've been on, called to jury duty, things like that. Those are things that are unique to that only state. Okay, so that's it. And remember, that's habitation domicile. You can maintain a habitation domicile in one place while residing all over the planet for any amount of time that you want. Remember, like when someone goes in the military in some place, they consider that place they entered in as their habitation domicile. They can vote on them all over the world because they have representation in Congress there. They have, they're counted on the census is there. They may have a driver's license and they can maintain that for 30 years. And so residency is not, and of course, if you're going to do the passport process and you have a driver's license in a particular state, then of course that would be where you have your habitation domicile. Someone says, might be for what might be a lot of people interested in the process but currently employed, we wonder how limits and bounds on making a living to do state citizens have. Unlimited way of making money. Being employed is always a limited way. There's no guarantee of employment because in a moment there's a pandemic, employers told by the government to shut down because you're not, say is, no, not going to participate with you in your tax stand. And so having, it's like you know what the problem is? I think is can do better. All right, so let's see if that was sorry for the delay, but I think that's going to be a better signal for that. And sorry, don't you love all the technical nonsense? So what we say is that no one is going to take a tax stand as an employee. So if you really love the company that you work for, then what we recommend is that you contract with them. Again, they're going to ask for a tax ID or what have you. You're going to provide a W-8 and W-9. We have those resources for our clients and doing those things. What's also exciting is that you can tell them that you're doing a process with the State Department, eliminating your income tax liability. So therefore you have to do things differently. And so employment won't be one of those things that you can do. And no, there's not a way to do a W-4 form so that you don't have a tax liability, because people will deal with the W-4 form and deal with taxes and they're still paying Social Security. It's not outside that jurisdiction. And we're going to handle that in the 8 o'clock hour when I talk about IRS and those forms associated with what they consider frivolous. We're going to talk about that in the 8 o'clock hour. Did I hear about the California exit tax plan? No, I don't have confidence that California will have anything good. And I don't know what tax they're referring to with respect to the exit the tax. Person says, unfortunately, I'm forced to elect the federal citizenship status in order to work. And then again, you can choose not to. And listen, Mike, one of the things about this process is it's not, there's certainly administrative remedies and things like that. But as we say in all these matters, what you think is possible and what you believe about yourself and what level of responsibility you're willing to have in your life is going to determine how free you're going to be. And because the truth is that no one is forcing you to elect to be a federal citizen. It's a choice. And although it may be a difficult choice, and for many people, these are difficult choices. I get it. You have to weigh, whether you want to collect receipts and give an account for every nickel that you earn, if you will, in your life to the pedophiles in the District of Columbia, or you're just going to write letters and be truthful and be able to keep all of the fruit of your labor. That's going to be much better. And again, being employed will give you a certain amount of return for your investment. What we want people to do is be able to make money independent of their time so that they're not selling their life for their labor. Actually, if you own something that created wealth for you instead of that, you're spending your time, and that's how you're making or creating your wealth. It's a different way of looking at things, and we're committed to helping you in that. Yeah, people can be a citizen of their state, and of course they may be a federal citizen. That's true as well. But if you're a citizen of your state, you can be you can also not be a federal citizen or a United States citizen. We have court cases that say exactly that, and that's so good. They want to tax citizens who have some wealth when they leave California. Yeah, now you have to escape California. That's just crazy talk. Yeah, well, California is a communist country, so communist countries, unless they start closing their border, keeping their people in, kind of like the way America will do on our southern border, We were building a wall to keep Americans in. That's why governments build walls, to keep people in, not to keep people out. That's the lie. But all you have to do is look at history and you'll see that. Federal citizens also sponsor and enable all the evil the government gets involved with this process. You're not supporting and funding all that evil. Well, I mean, listen, everything you buy, there are taxes in it. Nothing that you pay in the federal income tax goes to run the government. It goes to interest payments and transfer payments to the on the debt. And so, if you look up the Grace Commission during the Reagan administration, where they were dealing with government waste and such as that, you can read that and see that not one nickel of the income tax goes to run, goes to the government for services that people expect. So the government makes money other ways. And the biggest way government makes money to run its business is it continues to borrow money from the central bank, which they provide what? Nothing. They just provide the system in which they profit hugely on the labor of everyone worldwide, certainly in America. So why participate in that? That by itself is worth shutting that down. So that's going on. Just wanted to mention, a lot of people want to know, once they want to do one of the processes, how do they go about signing up? So if you want to do, we have two ways to do the passport process. And the reason we talk about the passport process is because that's usually the way people will begin to pull out of the federal zone, because they're going to deal with their citizenship in that passport process, where you swear on the DS-11, the passport application, that you are a United States citizen. So it's in that place that we communicate to the federal government or to the State Department that you're not, or we're not a 14th Amendment federal citizen, but we're a citizen of our state, which is based in habitation and domicile. If you look at the Constitution, Article 4, Section 2, it says the citizens of the states are entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. So there were no United States citizens before the 14th Amendment. They loosely would say that if you were a citizen of one of the states, then you're a United States citizen. But there was no statutory federal citizen before the 14th Amendment. There were only citizens of your state. That's the way it was in America until the 14th Amendment was passed. Then after that, as you moved into the 19th century, you began, American people were called Americans, and then eventually the federal government began to call everyone U.S. citizens. And I think it blended that term into their control. Of course, as the 14th Amendment says, that these are citizens subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That's how they have that control. So we begin this process with the passport process. And so we can do that process for you, in which we'll do your paperwork, and then we will do also the work with the driver's license and things like that. We also have all of our alignment workshops are also in the price, the $4,400 that we have for the full passport process. Those that feel more confident do their own paperwork, we have that process. Those people have to take the state citizenship class first, and then they can have access to the passport workshop, which that is $1,660 for the passport workshop. That workshop also includes all the alignment classes and workshops are all included in that price. And sometimes people will do the class, but we do require the class for both clients. And so when I talk about the class, I'm talking about the state versus federal citizenship class. It's about a 6-hour class, and we deal with the states, where they came about, the Constitution in its broad strokes. We end up dealing with the income tax from the tax code and its terms and such as that, so you can see who it is that has the tax liability. And like we say many times to our clients, it's less important that you know or believe that you don't have an income tax liability. It's more important for you to realize who does and why. Because when you know who does and why, you're going to be at peace about whether that's you or not. And that's an important distinction to make. So that's the passport process. And again, all of our other supporting things are W8, W9, and the driver's license work and all that. All that is there to support you in functioning, doing business, things like that. If you're going to sell real estate, property, or you're buying it, you want to make sure that in all your interaction with government that you're staying out of the federal zone. It's not difficult to do this process, but you definitely have to have your paperwork together. In the 8 o'clock hour, we're going to talk about why the IRS considers this process as frivolous. And I want to talk about that. And we're going to read, I'm going to show it on the screen. And although you won't be able to see that on my desktop on YouTube, you'll be able to listen. But in the online, the go-to meeting that we have here live, you'll be able to see that. And I'll start to record that part of our go-to meeting anyway. The question is, can we get outside this IRS debt still owed from past years? That can be challenging for people. The best thing you can do is to secure your property so that they don't move to lien or levy. We certainly can interact, and we've had clients that have interacted with IRS and explained that they've not had that obligation, and certainly we look for them to certify or who they believe. But remember, everything the IRS is doing was never against you in the sense that they targeted you and everything that empowers them has been you, because you fill out all your paperwork, all of it with IRS, under penalty of perjury as true and correct. And of course, there is a certain amount of fraud in that. I get it, but how intelligent are we as a people when you're signing the bottom of a 1040 form as true, correct, and complete? When I ask people, I say, so if you filled out a 1040 form, how do you know it's true? Are you a tax attorney? No. Are you a certified public accountant that you've been trained by the IRS? No. So how much have you ever read in the tax code? Do you know anything about tax law? Of course not. So how the hell do you know if it's true? You don't know if it's correct, and you don't know if it's complete. The IRS is going to tell you, despite you swearing under penalty of perjury that it's true, correct, and complete, you're going to swear and sign it. Now, what respect should the government have for us when it's laughable? How the hell do I know about true, correct, and complete? I remember being in a hotel during the whole COVID crap, right? I was in a hotel. It was in Maine, and my wife and I were there, and I was in a lobby full of people. They all have masks on. I don't wear a mask, never have. And so they give you a piece of paper that says, have you ever been around anybody with COVID ever since in the last 2 weeks? And I was like, I said to the woman, how the hell do I know if I've been around with someone with COVID? And I turned around to everybody in the lobby. Anybody been around COVID in the last 2 weeks? No, I don't know. You don't know? How the hell do I know? How could I sign a piece of paper saying that I have or haven't been around COVID in the last 2 weeks? So I wrote on their paper, not trained in COVID, have not a clue. And I signed it. I said, listen, you're not responsible for my health. I absolve you of all responsibility of my health. I love you. God bless you. You're the best. That's what I write on these papers, so it's just crazy. But again, what do you know about the tax code and whether something is true, correct, and complete? Someone asked, is this correct? The 14th Amendment did not and could not grant freed slave citizenship in any of the 50 states. No, the 14th Amendment doesn't create state citizens. So it doesn't do that. It creates federal citizens subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So that's what the 14th Amendment does. Okay, it doesn't create habitation domicile. How do I know that? Because the citizens of Puerto Rico are also U.S. citizens, and so that's what a 14th Amendment is: a citizen subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So, yeah, it doesn't grant anything with respect to that. Okay, the slaves that were being harmed in those southern states, they were claiming that citizenship because they were going to be treated better until the 21st century, when IRS can put people in jail for things like that, and tax and regulate them and do all sorts of other things, run and control their drugs, run and control their firearms, run and control their food, drugs, all the things that you read in the Federal Code of Regulations, puts children in selective service, all that. That's what it is to be a federal citizen. Someone says, I have a small business and my accountant did not pay my sales tax for 2 years. I got audited and now owe 82,000 sales tax. Sales tax is totally separate from, well, there's no federal sales tax, so that whatever state you're in, that's that's a state issue. That's not a federal issue. There's no federal state tax or federal sales tax. But again, in that situation, if your accountant's not going to step up, if they fail to do what they're supposed to do, I would reach out to, again, I mean, that's a pretty significant oops, with respect to collecting. The biggest thing is why become an agent for your state? Do all your stuff privately so that you're not participating in any of that. Let me see, make sure I'm catching a question online that says, can we get outstanding IRS debt still owed from the past? Correct. One of the remedies that if you were going to discharge debt, depending on how much IRS debt, take some banker credit and pay off the IRS with the banking credit, and then discharge the unsecured credit. That way the bankers cover it. That'll be fun. Do you have to take the class prior to the passport process? Well, you do if you're going to do the passport workshop. It is required in that way. In the full passport process, it isn't a prerequisite, but it will be required to view that class before you get into the alignment and all of that. And it is included in that that passport process. But we do believe that it is intrinsic in understanding what we're doing. So the client cannot do anything else until they take that class. They won't have access to any of our other services until they take it. So from that standpoint, it would be, but not to begin their passport process. And listen, most of the time as we begin the passport process, you have time to take and do 6 hours of preliminary study for this. It's definitely intrinsic. Okay. Have I ever heard of cracking the code? Oh yes, I've heard of cracking the code. That's Hanson's work. I'm sorry, Pete Hendrickson, not Hanson. Yeah, and Pete went to prison. And look, their IRS has kicked out all that stuff. All that's true, but not for everyone. Some have and some haven't. So he's been very busy and all that. He doesn't deal with federal jurisdiction. He's not dealing with Social Security. So it's a remedy that he may have come up with, and maybe the IRS is doing with that, but it doesn't deal with jurisdiction. So it's not something that we recommend. But people have benefited, and some people haven't. But I do have the book Cracking the Code, and I've read it. Can I cross R and void the swear under penalty per on the IRS form? No, they'll consider it frivolous. That action will cost you $5,000. So I don't recommend you. Listen, if you don't have a tax liability, why would you be filling out forms? It's like, oh, I don't have to do this, so I'm just going to cross stuff up because somehow I still want to fill out forms. I don't recommend that. So what's the remedy for outstanding IRS still owed? Just dealing with IRS, it's not likely you're gonna deal with someone like an attorney. Um, if you have to sue IRS for their misclassification, but you got to remember, you got to own those errors because you're the one that has said that you owed it on some level. So that's a challenging thing. So maybe depending on how much it is, um, because I don't know that bankruptcies, which is a federal citizen type of remedy, is going to cover that. So there are people now. We've had people do the process in which they haven't had a certification. There was $1 million. There was one client. He did the state citizenship stuff and got his passport and he had his explanatory statement. That's an easy way to deal with that because he never was a federal citizen. That is fine. But nowadays, since 2008, 2006, they passed the what they call the FAST Act, 32101 of the FAST Act, where if there's $50,000 or greater in back IRS debt, then the IRS will write to the State Department and say that they can't issue passport. That's the biggest trouble. If they haven't got a certification yet or sent any notice of certification, then I would quickly do the passport process, and then that way you'll have evidence in your passport process that you can deal with IRS. And if you had to deal with it in court, that would be a successful remedy. Someone says here, let me see here. What is very interesting is that when someone's citizen status becomes federal, they lose property rights because property cannot own property. Is that correct? I don't consider people property. So I don't, anytime somebody owns somebody, that's illegal and it's also immoral. So I don't think about federal citizens as property. I think it's a privilege that people have chosen and they don't have to choose it. So at no time do I ever consider that people are property for any reason at all. I would be loosely on that area with respect to children, but even that, because they're human, because they're people, because they're your offspring, you wouldn't tend to refer to your offspring as your property, and yet would you consider your own body your property? It's a terrible type of term for something as divinely connected as people. So, but anyway, so after taking the class, if I find out this doesn't work for me, can I get a refund minus the class fee if I pay the full assistance? You would be the first person that wouldn't find whatever works for me. And how would you define what doesn't work for you? So listen, I'll just make it really clear. There are no refunds to this process. When you sign up, you should be committed. You should know before you do our process if it's going to work for you or not. Okay, so there are no refunds in our classes. If you look at the website at the bottom, there are no refunds. And if you're watching the class, so we'll commit to doing the process and doing exactly what we say we're going to do, and you commit to whatever it is you want. So if you're not certain that it's good for you, then I guess you should study some more and check out some things. You might take the class so that you can learn a little bit about me, understand what it is we're specifically doing, then you'll be in that good place. But no, we don't have refunds for our classes and workshops. But I'd be glad to answer any of your questions or talk to you about what it is you're thinking with respect to doesn't work for me. And let's say you take the class, let's say you do the passport process, and then you're out of the federal zone and all that, and then all of a sudden you get scared and determine that it's not good for you because you're afraid. And so therefore, that's not my responsibility that you are processing your relationship with government. Or maybe you decide that it's much easier to go on welfare and then get Social Security and all that stuff. And so that works for you. So therefore, if you can get your refund because you realize that being responsible for yourself doesn't work for you, I don't know what works for you means. So consequently, it's not really, this process might not be for you because it requires a certain level of responsibility for what you do. So isn't the IRS non-federal agency? Congress never approved this. Congress has approved all the IRS crap. Don't think they haven't. They use the IRS all the time. And listen, people say, is it not federal? Of course, everyone that's working for the federal government is a government entity or agency. The IRS, many people believe the IRS is based out of Puerto Rico. Well, duh, Puerto Rico is a federal territory. It's all in the federal zone. The central bank, of course, is a private cartel in that regard. Of course, how's it federal? It's as federal as the Federal Reserve Act. That's how federal the Federal Reserve is. But it's not necessarily a branch of the government. Those people have no accountability to the Congress. That's absolutely true. If you read Ed Griffin's Creature from Jekyll Island, you'll see just how, the Federal Reserve isn't, part of the federal government. But has it been sanctioned by the Congress? Hell yeah. But do they have obligations to the Congress? Not a bit. And they've written the act that way. You just have to read it. Then it says, is this accurate? Slavery was abolished, but the class of citizenship granted to the freed slaves in the 14th Amendment was not abolished. Well, that's true. Many people believe the 14th Amendment was never ratified. That I agree that it wasn't either. I believe that when the South walked out of the Union, that was the end of the Union. There was no more a quorum. So many people believe the Union was over at the Civil War and when it was all done. Because you can't compel people into the Congress and then determine how they're going to vote in a free republic in that regard. So many people think the Union was done at that time. Matter of fact, the South felt that the Civil War was the second Revolutionary War. So, and going on, it says here, citizens of the 50 states may freely elect to be treated or considered as federal citizens, be acknowledging this in certain forms. Of course, if a state citizen is based in habitation domicile, if they fill out forms as a federal citizen, and that the IRS and the federal government defines U.S. citizenship by the 14th Amendment, then yes, they're filling out forms and behaving as people are, as they're a federal citizen. They're behaving like federal citizens, and they fill out paperwork like federal citizens. And consequently, the federal government treats them as federal citizens. Let me see, make sure I'm not missing anything from anybody. Someone says, can Canadians buy property in the States and get the land patent, allodial title to not pay property taxes? Yeah, I mean, if Canadians can, listen, if the Chinese can buy property in America, why can't Canadians buy property? Sure, you can freely avail yourself. But if you come into America as a resident alien, then you're certainly going to be in the federal zone that way. And of course, in those real estate transactions, you might be creating tax liabilities in that paperwork and all that. So as far as land patent, allodial title, and things like that, those are not necessarily, there's elements of that are certainly federal, because when you purchase property, not knowing, you might be buying property from a federal citizen, and then they're transferring a United States real property interest, which is section 1445 of the tax code. You can read in there what it is that the person is doing. Now, if the Canadians coming in, they're obviously not going to be, they're going to be alien, and so they will be declaring, they're not declaring that they're a U.S. citizen, but the other party or the title company or whoever will be treating that Canadian as a resident alien. And of course, they're going to fill out tax forms and all that. So you'd have to understand how to stay out of the federal zone if you're going to deal with it. Property taxes deals with the town, the county, and the state. Those are whole other jurisdictions, a whole other matter, which we're not going to get into tonight. But that's the Canadian citizen. Person says, as a disabled military veteran on Social Security disability, how can I get involved and make this work for me? Well, you're on welfare, you're on military welfare, and Social Security is also welfare. So, you've made choices and have done that. And look, it's not likely that, that any of that stuff is going to stop if you do these processes. You can choose if you're not going to file or pay federal income taxes. when you signed into the military, you filled out forms as a U.S. citizen, such as that. And Social Security is not a right, it's a privilege, and of course it is senior welfare. It's not the Congress doesn't owe it to you, and so a lot of people have never read, the Social Security Act. So how can it make it work for you? You can stop receiving money from the District of Columbia because all those things that you're receiving brings you into the federal zone when you're receiving benefits from the District of Columbia. And so it creates a tax liability. So could the IRS take that money? Sure. I don't think they usually take the disabled vet money, but they certainly have and have taken Social Security from people, sometimes 15%, depends on what it is. If the IRS determines that, that you haven't filed and have a tax liability, and then they figure out a tax return for you, that's the thing IRS does. And so, sure, the IRS can take that money. What we say usually is all in or all out, So, that's it. So you have to decide whether you want to be, again, I say all in or all out. So if you don't know how you can function without being tied to the federal government, well, then either untie yourself from the federal government or just be all in and learn, to deal with it and be in that jurisdiction and, be taxed and pay. But it's difficult to be on both sides of that. Pete Hendrickson has 3 articles attempting to debunk the federal zone approach promoted here. I read them, and I wonder if you're familiar with his arguments. I have read his arguments. I don't recall off the top of my head, but it's okay that people don't agree with it. I wish him well. But, we've had all you have to ask yourself has Pete ever gone to prison? He has, and, maybe he was doing the same things. You can ask. I mean, there's a lot of people that he has served and have benefited, and then there's people that haven't. And so that's okay. So you get to check out Pete's stuff, and you get to determine whether what we're doing works for you. And the beauty of it is you get to figure it out for yourself whether that's what you're going to do. So that'll be cool. What exactly is included with the full passport assistance? Again, all of the alignment workshops, which is the alignment workshop itself that deals with driver's license, voter applications, jury duty. It has documents. All of the workshops have templates and documents that are included. The only class we have is the state citizenship class, and it doesn't have any worksheets or templates. It does have a book called End of All Evil, which is wonderful, by Jeremy Locke. And then, of course, it has the PowerPoint presentation, but it's just a class. And again, the alignment workshop is one of those workshops. There's a W8 and W9 workshop. There's a 1445 workshop that deals with real estate and such as that. Also included is we have an all rights reserved stamp that those full passport clients get. And so we make sure that they have that as well. Then it says, is the consultation included with the full service? All the consultation associated with that passport process is included, of course. For people that are moving their business, or they're heavily in business, or maybe they have multiple businesses and they need to navigate out of the public sector, if you will, into the private, we have a number of different support for that. For those that are wanting to be a part of our weekly accountability call, there's no counsel in that. That's just a lot of times we'll use that for people who are employed, and then they want to set a goal of starting their own business, and they just need some accountability, because most of the time we're running on automatic mode, and life gets by and we don't ever get things going because there's nobody to account to. That's what that is. And again, that's we just want to support people in creating a business and things like that. If you're looking for counsel for whether that's launching your business, ending your corporations and all that stuff, then we have a one-on-one process. Now, normally our counsel assistance is $450 an hour, and I'll get on the call with you. We'll talk about all your stuff, all the specifics. But for $300 an hour, you can sign up for 6 months and do a weekly call, and we'll move you from where you are to being out of the public and into the private, and we'll talk you through that. We'll talk about what you need. If we have extra paperwork that'll come in, that's not part of the passport process. That's just part of us helping you, come out of those entanglements. So that's available, but that's one-on-one. Then we have for $100 an hour, which is every week. But that's in a group of 10, or it could be up to 10 people in that group. But I won't be dealing with you one-on-one. I would be dealing with like this collectively, and we would do Q&A and answers like this. That's less expensive, but you can get all your questions answered, and we'll do an hour that way. And depending on how many people people are in there, we may expand that to a second hour, depending on how many people. But usually we can deal with it in an hour's time. Let me make sure I don't miss any of these questions. So as if I want to get in alignment with my bank, do I send them a W-8 and W-9? Well, yeah, usually we have a W-8 and W-9 that's specifically for the state citizen. We don't use or recommend using the W-8 BEN. A W-9 is designed for the state citizen outside the federal zone. It shows your exemption. The W-8 is a certificate of foreign status. And again, we have all these codes, and all these are documents that people have sent to the IRS. IRS has no problem with these documents, and they're used. We've sent them to corporations. I've sent them to H&R Block when they were paying me for work I was doing for them. And so, these have been tried and are true. And again, these are available only to clients. And so, but they're included in the passport processes. Here's someone says, can Canadians use the trust program? If a Canadian is in America, no. A trust, a foreign irrevocable trust, there's constitutional standards and things like that. The nature of that kind of a trust, sure, you can create a trust by contract, of course. And I could talk about that, but you're going to need to understand what statutes, and do the Canadians have a constitution? Are their rights secured? Do governments at least pretend to secure rights? If they don't, then you should leave that communist country and escape and find a place to where at least the government at least pretends to secure your rights. So I think we've had a lot of response from Canadians, and I think what I'm going to do is, with respect to this passport process, or I should say their income tax liability, I am aware that there's someone that does some statutory work in Canada. I can locate who that is. That's a reference from Jeff. I'm aware of Jeff Berwick. Not him, but there's someone that he knows. But I can talk about that in general principles standards, and you can understand what that is. And then you might figure out how to navigate that. So anyway, so that's something that you might consider. And so we have a number of contacts from Canadians that we may do a specific call for Canadians and talk about that. We probably would. I don't know how soon we'll do that, but probably sooner than later on some regard. Someone's trying to call in, and I'll just have to keep saying no. Under President Lincoln, an income tax law was levied. Who was liable for the tax? I give up. I have no idea. I'd have to look that up or determine that. But Lincoln was a Federalist. He's a tyrant. So there was nothing happened with the Emancipation Proclamation. The president doesn't have such power. The president's not a legislator, so he can't pass law by his decree. All of the presidential orders order things that are in the federal zone. The executive branch, all of the things that fall under the running of the government is under the executive branch, and he can order that. And of course, federal citizens are in the executive, branch or are subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So the president can order federal citizens to do certain things, jump through certain hoops, and of course, selective service is part of that. And so your young children can also be drafted based upon your wanting to, be a federal citizen, such as that. So, then someone says, "Oh, we're getting ready to go into the 8 o'clock hour," and so we're gonna wrap up these questions. We can come back to them, but I do want to get into talking about IRS. How do I set up one? Let me see. I guess that the context is a trust. How do I set up one? I want to see if it fits my business and life. Well, you can look on the Destination Freedom website under conference calls and scroll down. There's an audio under trusts. I talk about trusts. We only do trusts for our clients. And so they haven't done the passport process, we won't be serving anyone with respect to trusts. So that's one thing. And it says, let's see here. Someone says, "I am a cryptocurrency trader and I had to go through KYC with a couple exchanges. I understand that the exchanges report my transactions and gains to the IRS, of course. How does this affect my tax liability after transaction?" And again, you filled out all that KYC like you're a federal citizen, and so consequently, they report like a 1099. They're going to report to IRS like, so if you were going to do a KYC, you'd have to do it with an explanatory statement, all that. Then again, what I recommend is don't use exchanges that require KYC, not KFC, KYC. Use Trade Ogre and other exchanges that are not requiring that. So we're big into privacy. I never put our private identifiers into our crypto spaces. If you want to do transactions, then do them privately. Now, if you're trading on a particular platform, then either create one or come up with a platform that doesn't require that. Otherwise, you have to tell the truth with respect to it. So you might be saying that you might be giving them your W-8, W-9 and not a tax ID number, and therefore you're going to be still a state citizen and be doing the trading. That might be the best way to navigate that space. Someone says, so I'm just going to wrap up some of these questions. Leaving the federal zone is the most complete way out, or just being out. Not sure I understand the question. Someone says, can different ideas be discussed to look for common ground? Oh, you mean on this kind of a platform? No, I'm not interested in hashing out. I mean, when you got 30 years into a subject matter, then just, I'm not here trying to figure out what, we're just helping people to come out of the federal zone. So we're trying to you're trying to figure things out. And again, we can talk about these things, or you can go to other platforms and listen to what they are, buy their stuff or whatever it is. But I'm not interested in hashing out ideas. No. How about learning about both and having a discussion? I highly recommend you do that. I'm far too busy to be, I don't need to relearn this stuff. I'm just moving ahead and helping those that are interested. The whole idea is understanding if any earnings you receive are taxable. Again, we have a class that'll show you, who has an income tax liability. That's our state citizenship class. You don't have to be a client to take that class. You can sign up and take it. And then at the end of that, you'll know whether you want to file or pay, or whether you want to do that. You'll see who is the federal citizen and why, and that's how the IRS does that. The site says full passport service is $3,400. Is that true? Well, no. I think the site, I'd have to look again. The cost of the full passport process is $4,400. It's not 34, but it's 4,400. I will look through tonight and see if that was a typo, or I think there was a time when it was that, and we landed on the 44 as we began to launch this stuff here. So, but anyway, I'll go check that out and see. It may have been a typo in that regard. Let me see. So let me just wrap up here. This is still important for you guys. Do we need to convert IRA, Roth IRA accounts to a different account type after doing this process? No, I mean, if you're going to choose to leave it in there, then leave it in there until you're ready to pull it out. But again, I don't know that those things are very safe. They're tied to the stock market. They're losing value all the time. I would move them into something other than the dollar and all that debt that the stock market has. One, I mean, I'm not sure. How is schedule one of them? Not sure. I'm not, Ricardo, I don't understand your questions. What you can do is if you need to reach me, you can go to statecitizen@destinationfreedom.org and you can request to set up a call or something like that. I'd be glad to help. In 1861, in order to finance the Civil War, President Lincoln, yeah, okay. Okay, that's great about the Civil War. Thanks for the history of that. IRAs can be funded with precious metal. Can IRAs? I don't know. I'm not familiar with IRAs. So you'll have to ask someone that knows about IRAs. So, okay, so I want to get into talking about IRS and why the state citizenship stuff is frivolous. I got to find it, that document. So hang on one second. I'm just going to look at something because I don't have. Let me see if I can locate this. There we go. Hang on one second, and then I'll open up my desktop so that. Let me see if I can locate this. 1 second. Let me see if I can open up this. Okay. One of the things, a lot of times people will get things from IRS and they just don't read them. So let me see if I can have this one here. All right. Let's see if this will come up. Okay. So, anti-tax law evasion schemes, law and arguments. That's what. So let me just see if I'll let you see my desktop so that you can check this out. And we'll see if we go there. All right. Let me just make sure. So, yeah, those of you that are on YouTube, you can listen in to what I'm saying. And let me, and I won't be able to send you this link, but if you look under IRS, anti-tax law, evasion schemes, things like that, you can look at there and check that out. I will, I'm just going to bring this up. Let me just see if I can share my desktop. Share my screen. So hang on, let's see if we can take a look at this. There we go. Okay. All right, so you're looking at my desktop. Let me just kill some of this stuff here. Okay, so it says here, the meaning of certain terms used in Internal Revenue Code. Contention, taxpayer is not a citizen of the United States, thus not subject to federal income tax laws. So it says, so it makes reference to the taxpayer, okay? Now, if you looked up the word taxpayer, the dictionary definition would easily be one who pays a tax, right? That's a simple definition of it. But I don't think that's the best way to do this. So if we looked up, I just wanted to look up, let's see, Title 26, 7701. Now, you know what's better than doing that? Let me see if that's going to be the best bet. Yeah, let's see if this will come up. Cornell Law. Let's just look at it this way. Of course, I've highlighted this on my. We can look up the term. Now, this is Cornell Law. We look at this all the time. This is from the tax code. Okay. So let's look at the definition of the term taxpayer. Okay, because they're not defining that. But let's look at, here it is, number 14, taxpayer. The term taxpayer means, watch this, any person subject to any internal revenue tax. So already there's a presumption that the person's subject to any internal revenue tax. And of course, when we're talking about the internal revenue, we're talking about the IRS. Okay. When we're talking internal, we're talking about within the federal jurisdiction. That's internal. That's also considered domestic. Okay. So understanding these terms, and of course, you can look up all these terms in 7701. There's other places that are congruent with 7701 as well. But that's what a taxpayer is. One, let me read it again. The term taxpayer means any person, and again, if you look at this word person, that is going to be your an individual, and an individual according to Title V is a U.S. federal citizen and a resident alien. Now, it's an amazing thing to notice that it's the U.S. citizen, which is subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and the alien who is not represented by Congress. This is a foreigner that's residing in the District of Columbia, at least on paper. So both those are in federal jurisdiction. Okay, that's who the individual is in the definition of the term person. And of course, that term is at the top. It says so under person. The term person shall be construed to mean and include an individual. And then if you look up Title V, the word definition for individual, it says U.S. citizen, resident alien. Of course, it's also a state, trust, estate, partnership, association, company, or corporation. Those are all persons, okay? Now, I don't get into the old, I'm a person, I'm a fictitious entity. Let me tell you something, okay? Here's a fact, okay? When we talk about individuals, we're talking about people, not fictitious entities. Because I tell you right now, never in the history of America or the IRS ever has a trust, an estate, a partnership, an association, company, or corporation ever gone to frickin' jail. But there's been plenty of federal citizens and resident aliens gone to jail, okay? So we're not talking about fictitious entities. The idea of referring to all these entities as persons is it makes the tax code 1/5 the size if you were going to write tax code for every one of these entities. They just combine them together under person. They define it that way. It's a good way to write law because it covers a lot under a little. That's the idea. It's nothing magical about it, but it is consistent, okay? So if you look up those terms, it says exactly what it means. But so getting back to the taxpayer is any person subject to an internal revenue tax. Well, who's that? It's not saying. And yet the individual is the federal citizen. And when I say that, I'm telling you, we have it in writing. The State Department defines U.S. citizen by the 14th Amendment. We have it on letterhead. IRS in this code also defines U.S. citizen by the 14th Amendment. It's not rocket science, okay? And so the idea of that, so it establishes the person subject to an internal revenue tax. So if you read this, so it says, okay, it says the contention is the taxpayer is not a citizen of the United States. Well, of course it is. One who's subject to an internal revenue tax. Well, who's subject to the internal revenue tax? The U.S., that's a federal citizen, and resident aliens. And we show you this in the class in great detail. Some individuals argue they have rejected citizenship in the United States. Again, in the tax code, the term United States is the District of Columbia. Are we reading the law here? No, this is not the law. This is the explanation of allegedly the law. And it's not incongruent. I'm just saying, don't think this is law. This is just explaining, Lucy. So it says some individuals argue and rejected citizenship in the United States in favor of state citizenship. Therefore, they are relieved of their federal income tax obligations. A variation of this argument is that a person is a freeborn citizen of a particular state and thus was never a citizen of the United States. The underlying theme of these arguments is the same. The person is not a United States citizen and is not subject to federal tax laws because only United States citizens are subject to these laws. So getting that term United States correct is vital in understanding what they're writing right here. Now, here they're going to say the law. Watch this. The 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution defines the basis for the United States citizenship. Did I not say that's the truth? That's what they're saying here. Stating, here it is, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. The 14th Amendment therefore establishes simultaneous state and federal citizenship. See, claims that individuals are not citizens of the United States, but solely citizens of a sovereign state, watch, and not subject to federal taxation have been uniformly rejected by the courts. Why is that? Now, again, watch this. They get into these relevant case law. It says here, and watch. It says, in this one case law, despite taxpayers' linguistic gymnastics. So already if you're in federal court and you have not challenged jurisdiction and you're arguing income, you're arguing this or that, whatever it is, you're going to be in federal court. You're not going to be, the Constitution's not going to be, doesn't govern there. Why? Because it's in federal jurisdiction based in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the Constitution. But watch what it says. The taxpayer's linguistic gymnastics, he's a citizen of both the United States and Pennsylvania and liable for federal taxes. And it goes and says the court confirmed that tax evasion conviction and rejected the Sloan's argument that the federal tax laws did not apply to him because he was freeborn. All those things, there are statements that they make. Every single one of these court cases, if you look at the behavior of these people and what paperwork they have and what they fill out, you'll see that they have W-4 forms, they do some other things like that. None of these people have done a passport process of rejected it. They don't have it. And you'll see that they are basing their conviction of them knowing that they had a tax liability because they filled out W-4 forms. Many of these people are employers and things like that. I just want, and you can read some of that. I just want to show you one more. Let's see if I can, where is it here? Let's see. I want to find the other one that they did here. Yeah. This is under definition 77.1. This is an IRS document here. It says the purpose, the Internal Revenue Service is aware that some, what are we talking about? Taxpayers are claiming that they are not subject to federal income tax or that their income is excluded from taxation because, watch, one, the taxpayers, see, they're constantly calling them, they're talking about someone who is subject to an internal revenue tax. That's what it says. These taxpayers have declared that they have rejected or renounced United States citizenship. By the way, we don't do that because the taxpayers are citizens exclusively of a state, sometimes characterized as natural born citizen. We don't use that term, or sovereign state. Now, states are sovereign with respect to each other. Governments are sovereign with respect to each other. People are sovereign with respect to each other. The word sovereign means separate and distinct. So it's not like that's a bad term, but we don't use that sovereign citizens thing. It says, or taxpayers claim they're not persons as identified in the Internal Revenue Code. Watch. It says here, these taxpayers often furnish forms W-4 employee withholding allowance certificate to their employers on which the taxpayers claim excessive withholding allowances or claim complete exemption from withholding. Based on these forms, federal income taxes are not withheld from wages paid. Alternatively, these taxpayers attempt to avoid their federal income tax liability by submitting, here's another form, a 4852 substitute form for W-2 wage and tax statement, or form 1099-R distributions from pensions, annuities, and blah, 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 all this different stuff. It says to the Internal Revenue Service with zero on the line for the amount of wages received. These taxpayers often either fail to file returns or file returns showing no income and creating a refund for any withheld income taxes. The service is also aware that some of these promoters include return preparers and market a book and package or a kit or materials that claim to show taxpayers how they can avoid paying income taxes based on these and other meritless arguments. Okay? We agree with the IRS. We don't do this. That's why I tell you again and again, no one is going to take a tax stand while being employed, because no employer is going to have you on without filling out a W-4 form. And there's no magical way to fill out a W-4 form. You're not going to have them withholding. And many of these people are still paying Social Security, so they're not dealing with jurisdiction. And we don't serve any taxpayers, okay? We don't do any of that. If you're a federal citizen, as the IRS says, if you're a U.S. citizen or a resident alien, you have an obligation to file and pay federal income taxes. And that U.S. citizenship is based on the 14th Amendment. So that's what it says, and we agree with them. That's why we changed that citizenship status with the State Department, because we know they deal with citizenship. And so that's why we deal with all this. So if you continue to read these things, you'll see that the IRS is very clear. People fill out bad paperwork. That's what creates their tax liability. That's what the IRS uses against them. We were my children and I were in federal court on the Browns trial. It was a homeschooling event, and we knew the Browns, not personally, but we knew of them. We interacted in different circles and things like that. We'd have meetings and they would attend sometimes and things like that, but I didn't personally know them. But anyway, in the trial, the IRS prosecutor was using passport applications against them because they had signed them stating that they were U.S. citizens, and the federal government defines U.S. citizenship by the 14th Amendment. So they use it saying, hey, here's what they said. When traveling abroad, you are a U.S. citizen, but when it comes to paying tax, you're not. Is that the case? And of course, they didn't know that there was a way to fill that stuff out. So anyway, that's why we started doing the passport process, because I had done my passport as a state citizen and the State Department issued passport and all that. Then we get certified copies of the passport file from the Secretary of the United States, signed by the Secretary of the United States in a wet signature. You can use that for your facts and evidence if you were ever challenged in IRS court. And we've had no one in IRS court. So that's not something that that's easy to avoid if you have proper paperwork. And again, we don't serve taxpayers. All taxpayers in America have an obligation to file and pay income tax. The tax code doesn't say how who is liable in there, but that's what it says a taxpayer is. We do know that the individual, the U.S. citizen and resident alien, have those obligations. Like we say in the, if you look at the, let's see, if we look under the IRS, let's see, 1040 instructions, right? I mean, this is what we say is, there it is. And then we'll wrap up in this part of the talk. And it says, if you scroll down from IRS instructions on the page, it comes down to who are these forms for right here, and it says, these rules apply to all citizens regardless of where they live, all U.S. citizens regardless of where they live, and resident aliens. So you see, that's what we recognize. So if someone was asking me, do U.S. citizens have a tax liability? Absolutely. But I would recommend get that term United States very crystal clear in your head so you can understand it. Okay? Does that make sense? So we say what they say. I agree with the IRS on all those places where they had people saying that they didn't have an obligation. So someone could say, hey, I'm a state citizen, and yet have paperwork showing that they're a citizen of the District of Columbia in their driver's license, in their voting registration, in being called to jury duty. We interact with all these governments and we make sure that it's congruent with the communication that they have with the State Department. That's why we call it an alignment workshop, things like that. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And I hope the simplicity of that makes sense to you. Okay, so it looks like that's it for any questions here. We'll open up a little bit more for questions. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and let those guys go on YouTube. If you want to come over to DestinationFreedom.org and come on into the live GoToMeeting call, that's great. But otherwise, we'll see you next week on the call, and we'll answer your questions and all that. If you still have questions, you can go to the Destination Freedom website and hit the contact us. And we're working through, we have an awful lot of those contact us. We'll make sure that you get the information you need. We'll reach out to you and follow up with you, make sure no one's left behind. Okay, so we'll talk to you now. Stay on the call here, but we'll talk to you people in YouTube later. Remember, like and subscribe so you can catch these videos later on. Okay, we'll take care. See you soon. Okay, so there goes